Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI and Sustainability, a podcast series that dissects all nooks and crannies of the intersection between AI and sustainability. I'm Nafisa, and each episode we explore how emergent technologies like artificial intelligence are shaping key issues that affect our lives. I'm really excited to be diving into a conversation that brings together two pressing topics: AI and social justice. And the question we will be asking today is, can AI help achieve social justice? I'm excited to be joined by Professor Yuko Itatsu, an expert at the University of Tokyo who bridges the gap between academia and industry, closely working on the intersection of technology and society. If you're keen on exploring the role of ethics in tech and how social sciences shape the industry today, this is an episode you will not want to miss. Professor Itatsu, welcome to this episode of our podcast.
Thank you.
So before we dive into the very important question of can AI help achieve social justice, can you maybe briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Of course. Thank you, Nafisa. I'm really delighted to be here and have this conversation with you today. I'm Yuko Itatsu. I'm a professor at the University of Tokyo. I've been working on AI for the last 6 years or so. I'm a historian by training, actually, and I've been looking at the social implications of media technology. And so as an extension of that topic, I've been kind of stumbled into the AI sphere, but I'm currently involved in a research project on how artificial intelligence can have an impact on vulnerable populations. So that's where I am. Very nice to be here.
I know that you are serving as part of the AI ethics committee at one of the major tech companies. So you're directly involved in shaping sort of the future of transformative technology. So when it comes to tech, right, we often hear from engineers, data scientists, coders, tech execs. But how can the perspectives of social scientists influence how AI systems are designed, and what role do social scientists play in shaping AI ethics, policy, governance?
I think social scientists play a really crucial role in all parts of policy and governance when it comes to AI ethics. Legal experts, ethicists, and policymakers are really key in driving that conversation about regulation. On the other hand, historians like myself, I think, have a different kind of point of view. And what we can do is we can offer historical perspectives on kind of like the longer term dynamics that are at play and what kind of conversations are steering the dialogue on what kind of infrastructure is important for wild-scale implementation. And what I mean by that, for example, is, when electricity was first introduced, who were the players that were trying to create the dominance of electricity? Or when automobiles came into play, when they were mass produced, how did they compete with the train folks? And what were the kind of competitions that were at play? So I feel like we're here to be kind of interpreters, I suppose, of the past and make sure that the relevant information is also shared with the public.
I believe you have an AI and social justice program.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the program? What is it about?
Sure. It's a summer program open to all university students from around the world. And basically, there's a couple of components. One is there's a kind of mini lecture that I do every day. It's 10 sessions. The second component, actually, we take on a bit of a Model UN approach. And
a role play?
Yes, a role play, exactly. Last year, what we did is we found museums around the world that use AI technology to kind of recreate exchanges that you can have with Holocaust survivors. And what that does is basically there's a monitor in front of you in the museum. And this is a video image of a Holocaust survivor who's taken hours and hours and hours of testimony that they recorded. But the AI technology kicks in when you, as the museum visitor, actually talk to this monitor. And you ask questions, and the monitor then responds, basically cutting like excerpts of that testimony that has been pre-recorded to fit your question. And what it does basically is, so I think there's real good value in it, right? Holocaust survivors are shrinking in population. There's not a lot of people that you can actually talk to. This isn't just about Holocaust survivors. This could be about like the atomic bomb survivors, all sorts of historical trauma that needs to be kind of passed on as a legacy. I think in that way, it's a very useful technology. However, I think there are also ethical concerns that we can probably list up as well. So in the summer program, we have everybody taking on a particular role, a particular stakeholder. So it could be like a museum curator, it could be an educator, it could be somebody who does Holocaust studies, a family member of this person who gave the testimony, all these different kinds of roles. And we kind of do our research and come back and have a discussion about the usefulness, the effectiveness, and what are the kind of parameters that would allow this kind of use to be a just use, if you will, ethical use of technology. So those are kind of the things that we do in the summer program.
So it's a very interesting perspective, like bridging the gap between social justice and AI. And I think it's not intuitive to a lot of people, right? So working on the intersection of AI and social justice, I'm curious how you personally define social justice, especially in the realm of AI and tech.
Right. Yes. Social justice is such a loaded term, and there's probably many, many, many different ways to define it. But the way that I use it in my classroom is that it's kind of like a mindset. Social justice is a mindset that's driven by the assumption that all people, regardless of their upbringing or circumstance, should be able to live with human dignity.
Can you think of any concrete examples or instances of how AI can be leveraged to promote social justice?
There's one case in California where homelessness is a serious issue, and there's too many people to help it at once, obviously. So what this group of people who have done, this is a coalition of NGOs and scholars and government authorities. They've used the AI prediction model to figure out who needs what kind of help the most. So it's a triage that they've kind of made, they've automated basically. And so depending on, the kind of circumstances they're in, they might need short-term housing assistance, just something to kind of get them off the street to help them back into what they were regularly experiencing. It might be a healthcare facility that they might need to have access to, or maybe it's more of a long-term housing assistance that they need. But putting all the kind of data that they have into this system, the AI technology helps the human, what would you call them, administrators, to figure out what is the best way to support these people. So that's what they do. But of course, there's limitations to it as well, because the kinds of information that they might have or documentation that they might have might be limited, the people who are homeless. So I think it's a bit of a patchy kind of information that gets fed into the system. And so you definitely cannot just rely on the AI system. You have to have a human actually properly monitoring it.
In our previous episode, we actually talked about data and how sometimes the data that we feed the machine, right, isn't perfect, or not sometimes, all the times. It's not perfect. So we have to be cautious of the repercussions that it can have. Do you think that in your work, do you see that people are often surprised by how technology affects social, political, economic aspects of our lives?
I think so. I think, especially, we're in Japan right now. I think when I think about the ways in which people receive artificial intelligence technology in Japan, it's often kind of conceived of as a kind of shiny new object, a magical tool that might, poof, do something that we might find it difficult to do, or it's complicated. At the same time, even if we just look at the social media platforms, and now after I don't know how many years we've been using them, but a decade later, we see that there's actually been profound influence on young people and their psychology and how they relate to other people. So I think we have inherently that lens within us. I think it's just a matter of kind of prompting us to kind of use that lens.
How do you think historical and cultural attitudes towards automation and robotics in Japan influence public trust in AI compared to other regions?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of media portrayals. I think media representation of AI technology is really interesting and also actually it's not a frivolous thing either. Of course, when we look at Western narratives, if we look at Hollywood movies, it's kind of a scary, like the scary robots that's out to ruin humanity or destroy humanity. Whereas in Japan, there might be robots that are meant to be friends and help you and kind of live alongside you. But science fiction also is really important because I think it helps us think about, as you mentioned earlier, it helps us kind of tell that story of what is an acceptable tool and how we might actually imagine the use of that tool. And there are scholars who kind of actually talk about this, who say that, science fiction actually plays a big role or a significant enough role for roboticists and engineers in terms of what kind of goals that they set for themselves in their career or, as an inspiration for what they want to do. So, yeah, I think we can't take it too lightly.
I was curious about, because you have this advantage, right, of being very familiar with both contexts, Japanese context, Western context. Have you observed any significant differences in how general public perceives AI in different cultural contexts?
After the pandemic, I've had the privilege of being able to travel a little bit, and also the students who come to the summer program from around the world from all different kinds of cultural contexts. They kind of share with me their assumptions about AI and how they look at AI, and there's a real wide range. I think we tend to forget it when we're living in our each of our contexts, and so there's a real kind of benign attitude towards AI when we're in Japan. But if I go to countries like Australia, for example, or even in the US, there's a real kind of immediate kind of rejection or like a fear that they might show or a real strong concern. Yes, of using AI technology or allowing AI technology to kind of to seep into our systems too much. Whereas I might talk to somebody from China, for example, and they're really, familiar with the use of AI technology in their daily lives. One person was showing me a picture of them going through a ticket wicket at the subway station. It's got a panel that you show your face. It's a facial recognition system, basically. So you just go through it and it recognizes your face and it kind of takes money off your credit card. This kind of thing is normal for them as well. And so, I think coming back to the conversation about stories and science fiction, if we are able to think of a story that allows the use of AI technology to be used for social justice, like we don't see those kinds of stories yet. We see stories about destruction. We see stories about confrontation and tension. And so if we can see stories about that are more positive use of AI technology for an equitable society, that will definitely help, I think, in promoting innovation in that direction and also getting more people on board on the use of AI technology for good. I'm doing a collaborative research with colleagues in China as well, and we're doing a comparative study on facial recognition systems and how they're perceived in Japan and China. And we found that the older generation in Japan are far more hesitant of using facial recognition systems, whereas in China, it's not as there's not much of a reservation, and it's partly to do with the ways in which they become more familiar with different ways in which it's used, not just for kind of transportation, but also for entertainment and connecting with community and whatnot.
I think it ties to our central question. So one of the central questions of our podcast is the role of higher education institutions. So in your view, how can higher education institutions in Japan or beyond work together to improve AI literacy and upskill different segments of society?
Right. I think this is a really important question, and particularly because a lot of the technology companies have realized that AI literacy is really important. And so they offer a lot of free courses online, and I think that's super important. But at the same time, higher education institutions also have to do a lot more, I think. I understand that informatics is a part of the kind of Japanese curriculum now, and I think that's really important. But by the time they graduate from like a bachelor's degree, with a bachelor's degree, it would be ideal if they have a fundamental understanding of what AI is and what kind of algorithmic biases might exist, regardless of the discipline that they are studying. I've realized through my conversations that kind of for engineers, they're very interested and dedicated to the innovation part. And it's the ethical concerns are kind of almost like something that they can tweak later. I think it's probably just as good or even better to actually think about the social needs before the innovation starts. And so rather than us being the AI ethics conversation being an afterthought, I think it can be conversation at the beginning of the innovation.
What do you think should be taken into consideration when establishing regulation on ethical use of AI, specifically in higher education institutions?
It's really important, I think, to have a kind of granular level approach in the sense that I think it's really difficult to have any kind of sweeping regulation or a sweeping principle. I think it's really difficult to say, okay, we should use it for, almost everything that we can automate because like we're dealing with students and students learn in different ways and they have different kinds of needs. So if we automate it, and I think one of the things that I think is really important about AI technology is that it's really good at figuring out typical patterns and spewing out kind of typical responses, but it's not very good at dealing with the outliers. And I think that's something that we need to be very careful about in an educational setting because, no student should be left behind.
If you could give a piece of advice to policymakers, educators, or students who want to engage with AI in a way that would promote social justice, what would it be?
AI systems are very good at replicating our current society, but our current society is not perfect. So, do we want to be replicating an imperfect society? And kind of always thinking back to that question. What are we actually trying to replicate? What are we trying to automate? I think is a question that we need to be asking all the time. AI technology as it stands, I think, although we're in, one certain kind of wave, by the time the next wave comes, we'll look back and say, oh, AI technology in its current form was still in its infancy and it was limited. I think the one thing that we want to make sure that we don't do is that our vulnerable population remain vulnerable by using AI technology. I think that just is cementing inequality. So that's something I think we need to be reflecting on.
The sort of recurring lesson that we have in this podcast series is that we need to involve as many different people in these conversations from different, as you mentioned before, generations, different cultural backgrounds, different genders, so that we can create and design tools that would benefit everybody. No one is left behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I would like to switch gears a little bit and introduce our recurring segment, where I'll ask you a set of rapid fire questions, and we would love to hear your short answers to those questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, okay.
Don't worry, no pressure, except that there's pressure. So question number one, provide your favorite statistics related to AI and tell us more about it.
Okay, so my favorite statistics is part of this market research company. They've done a really big scale survey about how AI is perceived in 30 odd countries. And what it really shows, there's really clear patterns with the English speaking countries and the European countries, and also then separately with the Asian countries. And so I think these are really interesting things to always keep in mind, considering that the regulation conversation is happening quite, heavily in European countries. The innovation is happening a lot in the English-speaking countries. And so, what kind of role do the rest of us have?
Okay, number 2. If you could describe AI in 3 words, what would they be?
If I can have the liberty of using phrases, that would be great.
Let's
But
try phrases.
so one would be prediction tool. The second one would be maybe automation. And the third one is merely a resident of the digital world.
Oh, that's very deep and interesting. I think it's one of the things that we need to ruminate on and think more about, right?
Yeah.
And now on to number 3. We call it AI glossary of terms. The first word I would like you to define is, what is AI?
Okay, so what is AI? I think I'll answer this as a historian, as a humanities person. So my understanding of artificial intelligence is that it's a technological system that predicts the probable outcome of something based on the human reasoning model and decision making that it's trained upon. And also, I think the second part about this is that it's called artificial intelligence because there's a general consensus that computer scientists want to make this computer system something that simulates human intelligence. So what I'm trying to separate here is that it's not really a simulation of human intelligence because human intelligence is far more complicated, I think. And they don't know enough about human intelligence yet to replicate it. So it's just this idea that we want to, it's a goal. Artificial intelligence, I think, is a goal that's become kind of branded as such, but it's just a formula that has a fancy name.
Briefly define it. It's trying to be like human intelligence, but it's not.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. And the second concept I would like you to define is algorithm. What is an algorithm?
An algorithm is a computational formula created by software engineers to instruct a machine to do some kind of task. And but the formula is always created by a human, so it has implicit biases and assumptions about our society, and so it can cause biases in the output. Is that too long?
It's fine. It's fine. The last question, or the last part of the segment, is actually my favorite, and it's where we ask our experts a question and then we pose the same question to Gen AI. And we kind of want people to be able to compare how the views and opinions our experts have differ from those offered by a machine, to kind of make them think more about the everyday use of Gen AI.
Okay.
So the question I want to ask you is, can AI help achieve social justice?
Yes and no.
Can you explain a little bit?
Yes and no, in the sense that AI technology can only do what humans ask it to do. So it's merely a human, if humans want to achieve social justice, then AI can. If humans don't want to achieve social justice, it probably won't be able to.
Perfect. This is actually a very good and brief summary. So it does what humans want to do.
Yeah.
So if humans want to achieve social justice, it can. And if humans don't, it cannot.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering this question. Now let's hear what Gen AI has to say to the same question.
AI can be a powerful tool in promoting social justice by helping to identify and address inequalities. For example, AI can analyze data to uncover patterns of discrimination and suggest ways to create more equitable systems. However, it's important to remember that AI is a tool created and used by people, so it should be applied thoughtfully and ethically to truly benefit society. Addressing social justice also requires broader societal changes and active participation from communities and policymakers.
I agree with most of what that was spewed out. I would love to find out more about what kind of suggestions It said that they'd be able to suggest ways to create a more equitable society. I'd love to find out more. And if it works as a brainstorming tool for creating strategies for social justice, I think all the better. So yeah, good for whatever generative
you caught
AI
that. You caught that it said that it can help find ways to solve some of these issues.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us in today's episode and exploring this very important conversation on how AI contributes to or hinders. It was very nice to have you here today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And this is the end of this episode of AI in Sustainability. Thank you very much for joining us on this thought-provoking episode. I hope today's conversation gave you some new insights and sparked questions of your own. A big thank you to Professor Itatsu for sharing her experience and helping us navigate this complex topic. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. Stay tuned for more exciting conversations with amazing guests. And until next time, thank you for listening.